Late at night in the Landsark Empire, under the hazy moonlight, a young woman stood quietly alone on the balcony. The brief moment of peace was quickly shattered when the tyrant, Emperor Zarius, suddenly appeared and walked toward her. He gently slipped a dazzling pink-red diamond ring onto her finger and said, "This is your reward for your good behavior." Kaina smiled as she accepted it. On the surface, she praised the priceless gift, but inwardly, she was calculating. This gemstone alone could probably buy enough food for 50 years. However, this tyrant's kindness was nothing but a facade. Kaina knew well that she had only 3 months left. The memory of his death sentence still echoed in her ears. "My wife, you will die in 6 months." But there was one shocking secret that the arrogant emperor had no idea about. The poison known as the 6-month death was completely ineffective against her. Beneath the moonlight, the two shared a dance. Suddenly, Zarius' face darkened. He leaned in and whispered, "Won't die." His voice was so soft that Kaina couldn't catch the entire sentence. In truth, Kaina was a transmigrator who had entered a novel titled "The Saintess Fell in Love with an Adventurer." To make matters worse, she had become the short-lived wife of the main villain. She still vividly remembered the day he poisoned her. With a cruel smirk, he calmly announced that he had laced the wine she had just drunk. The poison would slowly spread and kill her in agony. After 6 months, he said he wanted to watch a coward like her tremble in fear while waiting for death. When Kaina desperately asked why he was doing this, she begged him to just kill her instead. Zarius merely replied coldly, "Then where's the fun in that? In the end, your existence is nothing more than entertainment for me." That was Zarius van Landsark, the man who ruled the empire through a reign of terror. At the age of 9, he murdered his own twin brother. At 13, he ascended the bloodstained throne. He was so ruthless that he treated human lives as worthless. He toyed with the royal families of defeated kingdoms before discarding them once he grew bored. When killing no longer amused him, he turned his hatred towards saintesses and began hunting the heroine Flora. And just as the novel foretold, this tyrant would eventually be slain by the male lead, the adventurer Lucian. Seeing Kaina's awkward expression, her maid Bestie mistook it for excitement, thinking that at last Her Majesty had caught the Emperor's attention and been invited to dinner. Kaina could only force a smile and reply, "That's right," but innocent Bestie had no idea that the honorable dinner she spoke of was actually the fateful moment that marked Kaina's death sentence. According to the novel's original plot, tonight, the tyrant, Zarius, would personally pour her a glass of red wine, and the moment she finished it, he would smirk and announce that it contained the deadly 6-month death poison. As the absolute ruler of the empire, Kaina had absolutely no way to refuse the wine he offered. What should I do? I've read this novel over and over. There has to be some clue. Back when she was a marketing director, managing dozens of employees, she had navigated countless crises. So there had to be a solution. As she racked her brain, Kaina's eyes suddenly lit up. She remembered. Her only way out now was Gamma, a genius pharmacist. In the original story, when the male lead Lucian was poisoned, the heroine Flora came to ask Gamma for an antidote, but he cruelly refused because she was only a commoner. It was precisely because of that despair that Flora awakened her saintess powers and cured herself. But Kaina didn't have the heroine's plot armor. She had to rely on herself. Turning to her bewildered maid, Kaina firmly ordered, "Bestie, I'm going into town. Prepare a maid's uniform for me at once." Bestie was utterly horrified. She stammered, "They won't let us leave without His Majesty's permission." But Kaina dismissed the idea outright. Ever since arriving at this palace, she had hidden away in her room, terrified of Zarius. Hardly anyone even knew what the Empress looked like. As long as she disguised herself as a maid, she could easily slip out unnoticed. The moment she thought of her husband in name only, a chill ran down Kaina's spine. His lifeless crimson eyes viewed everything in this world, even his own wife, as nothing more than toys. Her homeland, the small and impoverished kingdom of Ambrook, had once miraculously survived the Landsark Empire's conquest. But one day, the tyrant, Zarius, suddenly invaded and trampled her kingdom. For one absurd reason alone, he wanted to test the power of a new weapon. To seek peace, Ambrook offered up Kaina as tribute. Unlike her younger sister, who possessed light magic, Kaina was completely powerless. She became the perfect sacrifice. That mad emperor abandoned her inside the imperial palace. wondering what use she could be. Then he came up with a twisted idea. He would slowly kill her in the cruelest way possible, simply for his own amusement. Only a depraved devil in human form could come up with such a sick pastime. Standing in the lavish room, Kaina's eyes shone with unwavering determination. I refuse to be his plaything, no matter what. I have to escape that monster. In her previous life, Kaina's days had been nothing but tragedy. She grew up without a father, and her mother abandoned her. The only joy in the poor girl's life was reading cheap romance novels she bought with the little money she had. To escape her life of poverty, she devoted herself to studying and earned a scholarship to a prestigious university. Yet her fear of poverty ran so deep that even after graduating, she worked herself relentlessly. In the end, she collapsed and died of heart failure from overwork. Before closing her eyes, tears streamed down her face in overwhelming regret. I don't want to die. If only I had enjoyed life a little more. I want to live as my true self. And now, as the memories of a previous life returned, Kaina's desire to survive in this life burned even more fiercely. She absolutely refused to die such a meaningless death again. Putting on a plain hooded cloak, Kaina and her maid Bestie hurried into the city. As they ran, Bestie panted, wondering how someone who had never left the palace could know the capital streets so well. Kaina simply replied, "During all those days, I locked myself in my room. I wasn't sitting around doing nothing. I memorized the entire map of the capital." Their destination was a rundown apothecary. The moment they entered, the pharmacist, Gama, arrogantly raised his chin and asked. Kaina knew perfectly well that in the novel, his arrogance had always annoyed her as a reader. But now it worked to her advantage when Kaina asked him to prepare an antidote for a certain poison. Gama immediately sneered. "I am an apothecary personally recognized by His Majesty. I don't have time to make medicine for nobodies." Without another word, Kaina calmly drew out a dagger. The royal crest, engraved on its hilt, made Gama turn pale. It was an item reserved exclusively for the emperor. In fact, the prime minister had given her this dagger on her wedding day, along with a message: "If you can no longer endure His Majesty's cruelty, use this to end your own life." But now, Kaina was using it to turn the tables. Gama's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, the Empress?" The pharmacist's attitude changed completely. He immediately bowed and invited her into a private room. Kaina began weaving a convincing lie. She claimed she was acting as a messenger for her superior, who required an antidote for the 6-month death poison. Gama immediately scratched his head in confusion. He had only delivered that poison a few days ago. Calmly sipping her tea, Kaina replied, "They changed their mind. You know how unpredictable they can be." As she spoke, she placed a beautiful ruby necklace on the table as payment. Then she added a warning: "Go ahead and refuse, but you already know the consequences." That person's temper isn't exactly pleasant. Blinded by greed, Gama immediately got to work. Just 3 hours later, a shimmering vial of antidote was complete. Kaina was a little suspicious of how quickly it had been made, but she accepted it anyway. Before leaving, she shot him a piercing glance. "You know what will happen if this doesn't work, don't you?" Gama swore on his life that the antidote was genuine. Kaina left the necklace behind for the money-hungry pharmacist, who was grinning from ear to ear and quickly departed. On the way back, Kaina tightly clenched the necklace in her hand. Although it was an irreplaceable keepsake from her mother, the situation was desperate, and she had no choice but to take drastic measures. As long as she survived, every sacrifice would be worth it. At last, the fateful moment arrived. The dinner banquet began. As she entered the grand dining hall, the tyrant Zarius was already seated at the head of the table. Kaina lifted her chin and greeted him with a radiant, confident smile. "If this invitation comes from the empire's mighty ruler, then I am truly honored to accept." Zarius narrowed his eyes. He pushed a glass of blood-red wine toward her and tapped his fingers on the table. "I prepared this glass especially for you. Drink every last drop." Kaina stared at the wine. The moment she had been dreading had finally arrived. Deep down, she was trembling with fear. But there was no turning back now. Closing her eyes, Kaina tilted her head back and drained the poisoned wine, silently praying it would work. Gama is a genius pharmacist. That antidote has to work. The moment the glass was empty, Darius curled his lips into a cruel smile. "My wife, you will die in 6 months. What you just drank was a deadly poison." He leaned back smugly, waiting for the moment when the coward before him would tremble, cry, and beg for her life. Everything unfolded exactly as it had in the novel. But the current Kaina was no longer the same Kaina as before. Instead of panicking, she calmly replied, "I understand, Your Majesty." The smile on Darius's face vanished. "Didn't you hear me? You're going to die in 6 months. Aren't you afraid?" Kaina remained expressionless. "I'm not afraid. I have no choice but to accept my fate." In reality, inside, Kaina was screaming to run away as fast as she could. But she knew the capital was under extremely tight security. If she revealed any intention of escaping, Darius would surely have her executed on the spot. Her perfect plan was to avoid provoking him at all costs, request permission to move to a villa on the outskirts, then wait for the right opportunity to fake her death. After escaping, she would finally live a free and peaceful life, making up for the previous life she had lost to overwork. Kaina clearly remembered that in the novel, Darius despised weak and innocent people above all else. So she resolved to abandon her timid image and play the role of a strong, cunning empress to earn his approval, but fate had other plans. Darius suddenly rose to his feet, his voice filled with disgust. "You can't even entertain me. You're utterly worthless." The instant he finished speaking, in the blink of an eye, Darius drew the sword at his waist, its icy blade pressed against Kaina's neck, leaving a thin line of fresh blood on her pale skin. He looked at her with the eyes of a true murderer. "Perhaps I should kill you right now." Kaina's mind went completely blank. Inside, she screamed in despair. Wait, hold on. This wasn't part of the plan. Could this really be the end of me so much sooner than expected? She had finally been given a second chance at life. She absolutely couldn't let it end in such a ridiculous way. Ignoring the sword at her throat, Kaina gathered every ounce of courage and pleaded, "Your Majesty, please spare my life. I swear that within these 6 months, I will prove myself useful to you." The tyrant raised an eyebrow. A mocking glint flashed across his crimson eyes. What could someone as useless as you possibly accomplish? Kaina looked him straight in the eyes. "I will fulfill Your Majesty's greatest wish, to strengthen and expand this empire." In truth, this was an all-or-nothing gamble for Kaina. The novel had never mentioned Darius's true ambition. But for a man who had built a vast empire with his own hands, the desire to conquer the world was the most reasonable assumption. Besides, in her previous life, she had been a marketing director who specialized in driving growth through sheer determination. Hearing her bold promise, Darius merely sneered. A coward who hides in her room all day thinks she can accomplish something? But Kaina did not back down. "I wasn't hiding. Inside my room, I devoted all my time to reading and learning everything about this country." That wasn't a lie, whether she was the former Kaina from a small kingdom or the poor woman from her previous life. Reading had always been her greatest passion. During the months she was confined and lived in constant fear of being killed in the palace, books were the only thing that kept her calm and sane. The suffocating tension in the room finally eased. Darius lowered his sword and turned to walk away, leaving her with one final warning. "Remember this well. I have no intention of waiting the full 6 months. If you fail to prove your worth, I'll kill you myself." The moment the massive doors closed behind him, Katina clutched her chest and let out a sigh of relief. "Thank goodness, I managed to keep my life for now." But Darius was right. Her death sentence was now hanging over her head, ready to fall at any moment, perhaps even before the 6 months were up. There was no turning back now. She had no choice but to use the few fragments of information she knew about Darius's past from the novel to convince him of her worth. Lost in a whirlwind of thoughts, she was startled when her maid Bestie rushed over. Seeing her mistress's pale face, Bestie anxiously asked, "My lady, what's wrong? You look so pale. Could it be that the antidote didn't work?" Kaina gave her a gentle, reassuring smile. Although she would have to wait 6 months to know for certain, she chose to trust Gama's skill as a pharmacist. Kaina was truly grateful to Bestie, the only person who had remained loyal to her, caring for her ever since the days she was neglected in the impoverished kingdom of Ambrook. Just then, another figure appeared. It was the Prime Minister, Rafan. He was the one who had given her the royal crested dagger on her wedding day, along with the suggestion, if you can no longer endure His Majesty's cruelty, use it to end your own life. In the original novel, Rafan had once been a knight, the only person who cared for Darius while he was imprisoned in an underground dungeon as a child. In other words, he was the only man in the world whom the tyrant trusted enough to appoint as prime minister. However, the novel's chilling twist was this: Rafan would ultimately become the traitor. After Darius died, his greed consumed him. He seized the throne and became a tyrant, even more ruthless than his former master. In the end, he would be slain by Lucian. Kaina silently assessed the situation. A man of such humble origins could never become king on his own. He must already be secretly preparing for a coup. If I can find undeniable evidence to expose him, Darius will surely come to trust me. Rafan approached with a fake smile. He politely asked after her, then casually added, "I do hope that dagger proved useful to your majesty." Kaina understood the filthy implication perfectly. He was just as insane. He wanted her dead as soon as possible, to eliminate everyone around Darius and clear his own path to the throne. Knowing Kaina had just dined with the emperor, a sinister gleam flashed across Rafan's eyes. After being forced to drink that dreadful poison, you must have wanted to use that dagger to end your life, instead of waiting to die, didn't you? But the current Kaina was no longer the helpless queen awaiting death. She tilted her head slightly and flashed him a bright smile. "Not at all, it was a wonderful dinner." That unexpected reply made the Prime Minister's smile stiffen. He could only swallow his frustration, bow, and take his leave. Only after he disappeared did Kaina clutch her head and groan. "Seriously? Why is everyone in this palace so completely insane? Wait a second. The Eastern Palace is mainly the Emperor's private living quarters. The government offices are all in the Central District. So why would a Prime Minister like him be here alone, without even a single attendant? Unless he was heading to the Treasury." A light bulb suddenly went off in Kinya's mind. Back when she had read the novel, she had always wondered how someone like Rafan, born into nothing more than a baron's family, had managed to surpass. There was only one logical explanation: money. He had been embezzling the imperial treasury. This was the key to saving her life. She turned to her maid and firmly ordered, "Bestie, I want to go to the treasury. Can you lead me there?" One of the twin children is a demon destined to bring ruin upon the kingdom. It was an ancient curse, passed down through generations of the Lanjak royal family, and the tragedy truly began on the day the queen gave birth to twin princes. The younger twin never cried after he was born. For that reason alone, the king mercilessly declared him to be a demon. He concealed the existence of his younger son, locking him away in the deepest dungeon. He didn't even bother to give the child a name. Meanwhile, the elder twin was honored as the kingdom's only prince, bearing the glorious name Darius deep beneath the dark dungeon. While every servant treated the nameless child like an animal, only one person ever addressed him as Your Highness. That person was the knight Rafan. Rafan taught the boy how to read and how to wield a sword. What he never expected was that those very skills would nurture a true monster at the age of 9. The nameless child escaped the dungeon, personally slaughtering his twin brother and his own parents. He staged the scene to look like an assassination, then boldly claimed the name Darius and ascended the blood-soaked throne. That is why, although Darius now appears cold and distant, deep down, he still believes that Prime Minister Rafan is the only person in the world truly on his side. Back to the present. To expose the two-faced Prime Minister, Kaina knew she had to strike directly at the place where he hid his greatest weakness, the Ministry of Finance. Her sudden appearance left every official there stunned. After all, the queen, known only as a hostage from a defeated kingdom, had spent the past 7 months hiding fearfully in her room. Yet now she had personally come to inspect the financial records. A middle-aged man frowned and bluntly asked, "Excuse me, but who are you?" Kaina calmly replied, "I am Kaina Celeste Lanzak," upon hearing the imperial family name. The man reluctantly introduced himself as Gauntis, the Minister of Finance. But ridiculously, even though he knew exactly who she was, he didn't even bother giving Kaina a proper bow. When she requested to inspect the empire's finances, the officials exchanged glances and burst into laughter. In their eyes, Kaina was nothing more than the emperor's toy. What could a foolish little girl possibly know about complicated accounts? Seeing the officials' disrespect, Kaina finally realized just how low her status was in the palace. But in her previous life, she had been a CEO who rose from nothing. The business world had taught her one hard lesson: never, ever let your subordinates look down on you. No matter how uncertain she felt, on the outside, she had to project absolute authority. Kaina's gaze suddenly turned icy. "Sharp as a blade. Even if I am just a toy, I'm still the Empire's only empress. She stepped forward and asked in a threatening tone, or is there something in those ledgers you don't want me to see? With that single sentence, Voltus's smile vanished. He immediately lowered his head and stepped aside. Nothing like that. Please, Your Highness. Standing before the Finance Ministry's mountain of ledgers, Kaina was overwhelmed. But with her life on the line, she examined every page with unwavering determination. She had to uncover the Prime Minister's weakness. At last, her efforts paid off. Her eyes stopped on a particular entry. Capital Orphanage renovation expenses. The amount was enormous. What made it suspicious was that, on her way to Gama's shop, she had passed that orphanage and it was falling apart. It looked nothing like a place that had just been renovated. And the person in charge of the project was none other than Prime Minister Rafal. He had been embezzling public funds, and that wasn't all. For several days, Kaina stayed in the treasury, checking the ledgers. She uncovered countless suspicious transactions, and every trail led back to Rafal. While the nation was struggling, he was using that fortune to bribe the Empire's most powerful nobles, holding the stack of ledgers. She knew that if she showed this evidence to Zarius, he would immediately suspect a coup. The plan was perfect, but reality was cruel. A week later, an exhausted Kaina leaned against the door. She had submitted countless requests to meet the Emperor, but every one was mercilessly rejected. Out of options, she carried the ledgers to wait outside his bedroom. Late that night, footsteps echoed. Zarius appeared with his usual cold expression. The guards immediately drew their swords and pointed them straight at their empress. But the tyrant simply stood there, watching his wife being threatened, without the slightest reaction. Kaina sighed inwardly. She expected as much, yet it still stung. Taking a deep breath, she declared, "Your Majesty, I have something important to report." Without a word, Zarius opened the bedroom door and motioned for her to follow. As she stepped inside, Kaina realized it was her first time entering his bedroom. On their wedding night, the Emperor had abandoned her. Lost in thought, Kaina suddenly froze. Right before her, Zarius casually took off his shirt. His toned muscles were revealed beneath the light. Kaina's face instantly turned as red as a tomato. "Oh my goodness, this is my first time seeing a grown man shirtless." She stumbled back and stammered, "What are you doing?" Zarius slowly approached, cornering her against the wall. "Why else? Didn't you come all the way here to beg me to sleep with you?" Kaina's face flushed crimson as she hurriedly backed away and denied it. But the tyrant had no patience. His large hand gripped her chin. His eyes filled with icy, killing intent. "Or couldn't you wait 6 months? So you came here to die?" Kaina suddenly came to her senses. This man had no concept of flirting or romance. In his world, everyone existed to submit to him, and she was nothing more than a toy. He felt like crushing. Steeling herself, Kaina declared, "We made a deal. I'm here to prove my worth." With that, she held out the summarized financial report, exposing Prime Minister Rafal's embezzlement of the national treasury. Zarius looked at her with disdain, mocking her. "Why should I believe the nonsense of someone useless?" Kaina presented the capital orphanage as proof. The record showed enormous sums had been allocated for repairs over the years, yet it remained nothing but a ruined wreck. Kaina knew that compared to a puppet empress like her, Rafal was trusted 1,000 times more. He was the only person who had protected Zarius during his dark childhood, the only one this devil had ever trusted. Facing such betrayal would surely be a devastating blow. Looking him straight in the eye, Kaina said firmly, "Your Majesty, please don't fear losing your Prime Minister. From this moment on, I'll become your only light in this world. I'll prove that I can be of value, please." "Guards!" Zarius' furious roar cut her off. "Throw this woman into the dungeon." Without resisting, Kaina silently followed the guards. The iron lock clanged shut. Sitting on the cold dungeon floor, Kaina let out a sigh of relief. Being imprisoned was still better than being executed. She had already calculated everything. The Empire was exhausted by war. If such a huge amount of money vanished, Zarius would inevitably investigate